When I got clean, life became more important again. My health became important. I wanted to go to the gym. I wanted to do more activities with my life. I wasn't struggling anymore with waking up and trying to find a drug. I was waking up and wanting to achieve something each day. My life was in shambles before I got here. I had hurt everyone in my life, the people closest to me, my family. I lost a job. I lost everything. I found myself in jail with no one and nothing. Recovery has brought me a new way of life. It's brought me to a place in life where I never thought I could be or would get. I thought that I would need substances to enhance my life or to deal with things that I struggle with. Through this Oxford Center and through a 12-step program, it's gave me the stepping stones in life to become a better person and to live clean. Being able to come to a place that was structured, clean, peaceful, away from the chaos that I was living. You know, the everyday life here was something that I was able to get used to very quickly. My important thing was not to sit in the classroom all day. The activities here, I was able, you know, the equine therapy, the ropes course, being able to sit with my counselor and look over a lake, it was amazing. And the peace and serenity of just the grounds itself, I was quite excited about it. Where I was in my life, I was ready to get clean. So I wanted to be here. But I didn't know what this place had to offer when I first got here, but I was willing to give it a try. Being able to know that someone was looking after me 24 hours a day, that I was going to get 3 meals and be fully taken care of, it was very comforting, and they did a great job at it. Recovery is possible for anyone that's willing to do something different and wanting something different in their life.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christopher Moore. Rachel, thank you for being here with us today. First off, thanks MAPC for all the hard work it takes to put on a conference like this. It's much needed and important to have access to emerging research and knowledge that helps us be better in this field, so that those we're trying to help inevitably can be better themselves. So Mr. John Burke and I work in the front lines of the opioid epidemic, and not that I think any of us would ever say anything good has ever come from that. But one thing that's important to think about is what it has forced us to do, and that is ask ourselves, one, what are we doing as a helping professional? Two, is it working? And third, and sometimes most importantly, is there a better way? So in the age of information, and we know that with research and evidence-based practice, we know we're positioned to know better and do better. And I think there's an important question sometimes that it's hard to ask ourselves and probably harder to answer honestly, and that's because we know better and can be better, actually are we? We know that times are changing. New treatment practices and approaches are emerging, harm reduction, MAT, and what we've seen in the last 3.5 to 4 years with this harm reduction movement is just this ongoing clash between traditional models of treatment and different approaches that some often say conflict or oppose what we've always done, and some of us would say no, they actually work with them in the line. But while things are changing, obviously we are still seeing some consistent characteristics across the board, and one of the most important things that I think we always have to keep in front of us is this, that regardless of what treatment approach you may be taking, comparative studies between CBT, DBT, 12-step facilitation, and all these different things. What we know still to this day that rings true is that one of the greatest predictors of successful outcome is the relationship between the helping professional and that client. And so we do know that, you know, 30, 40 years into this thing, tracking data, outcomes, and so on, we still know the importance of that relationship between professional and client. Some other things that we still continue to see, commonly encountered characteristics, doing the same thing over and over again, resistant to change, black and white thinking, denial of harm calls, struggles to accept responsibility, and discards contrary evidence. Now, I know I'm in a room full of helping professionals that are very well experienced and versed in working with substance abuse disorders. And I would assume some of you are probably thinking that when I'm referencing these things, you've seen them before, you're familiar with them, and you probably think you know who I'm talking about. But who we see this most from is actually helping professionals and not clients. And that may be hard to think about. And so we're in unique positions in advancing harm reduction and trying to coexist with traditional treatment as usual approaches. What we see on a regular basis is people invested in treatment as is, and as is never been good enough. And why we're so invested in doing what we've always done is concerning. Resistant to change. You know, we know that there are new strategies and evidence-based practices that work, but very often people are resistant, you know, closed off. I had a counselor earlier this week speaking to one of our team members saying, well, man, I've tried harm reduction and I just don't believe it. From what I've seen, anybody trying harm reduction has been reduced to no longer exist. And so I began to speak up and I said, sir, while it's okay that you have that opinion, do you have some research and data to support your claim? And he said, no, I just know what I see. And I said, or is it that you see what you believe? He didn't catch it. He didn't catch it. Did y'all? It's not that he actually knows what he thinks. He sees what he believes. And how concerning is that for a professional? Knowing the power dynamics that exist between the supposed expert and the vulnerable who are in need of a message that will help them save their life. And I'm approaching this interaction with opinions that aren't based in research, they're not evidence, any of that. But because I don't agree with it and I don't like it, and it's new to me and it's not what we've always done, I have these private ideas, negative outlooks, and attitudes. And to carry on with how the conversation went, I said, sir, but I would caution you to be mindful of how those views and ideas and attitudes may spill out into your interaction with clients. And he gets real defensive with me, Mr. Burke. And he says, well, Chris, no, I would never say that to a client. Does he need to say it? Or Ty, is it real likely that if that's what he thinks and that's what he believes, it probably comes out indirectly as unconscious as our clients are when they're acting out and doing things and don't even realize it. So what I'm not here to do is to create conflict and controversy, which I've probably already done. But the purpose in doing that is this. I've worked with a lot of you in this room for a long time, and those that I don't know, I would assume that you're here because you want to make a difference. I would assume that you care about being good at what you do. I would assume that you care about being informed in the know and changing and evolving into what you need to be to truly help people, not with what you think needs to be happening in their life, but what they believe needs to be happening in their life. And so what we want to talk about today is not really new information, but from, I think, what we've seen over the last 3.5, 4 years is that we're a field that knows a lot. But when it comes to actually integrating that knowledge into practice and how we're interacting with people, oh my, we struggle just like the very folks we're trying to help. See, we know better, but often fail to what? Do better. Bush, don't that sound like the folks we work with every day? The folks that we judge when they're not making the progress we think they should make? Anyway, Mr. Burke's going to talk to us about some things because, again, as we're talking about these things, again, this is not new information, but if you can, and most of you know this, that professional and client relationship and how important it is. If we know that it's important in success, what we got to accept, Butch, is it means something when we start looking at when treatment goes wrong, right? I don't get to stand behind the success of one and ignore my role in the failure of many. So the question is, can we together today have some hard conversations, ask ourselves some really difficult questions so that we can embrace and live by the very things that we ask our clients to do? Because you ask them daily to take a look at who? Themselves. You ask them daily to look at some difficult things so that they can evolve, grow, and become what we know they can. But how many of us get so lost in looking at them that we forget to look at ourselves? And so, Mr. Burke.
Well, good afternoon. Are you awake? Ready to go home? I'm prepared to be here until 6:45. Let's talk about social determinants of health. Some of the underlying factors associated with substance use. You know, social determinants of health are those factors that are outside of our biology. We're talking about family, social environments, things that we interact with on a daily basis. These things impact our lives. In many ways, those people we often interact with are coming from environments many of us may never experience. They're dealing with poverty. They're dealing with single-parent homes, lack of many things, just the physical needs they lack. They don't have access to. When you think about the systems in which we all interact with, right? We're right now in a setting of higher education. Many people don't have access to quality schools, right? Quality health care. And when we're engaging with the client in our field, that is sometimes what's behind their behavior, the lack of. I think about it from this perspective. There are many levels to the social determinants of health, right? When we think about our families. And when I think about a family unit, I was fortunate in many respects. Wow. I was reared by my grandparents, but it was still a two-parent home. I didn't begin to feel the impacts of that until I started to go to school. And then I've had my peers say to me, well, where are your parents? And you know what I didn't even think about, because at this time, I'm still 5 and 6 years old. So I'm thinking about the fact that I feel like an other now, right? But again, I'm 5 and 6, so I'm not really able to process that. So be mindful of that when you're interacting with clients. It's increasingly clear that social determinants of health have an impact on those that we are intending to help. It plays a significant role. Financial strain. And I don't know what any of us are dealing with financially, but imagine someone, let's call them a person of 35 years of age, male or female, that you're engaging with. Yet in their formative years, they were in a household where the parents struggled just to meet the daily needs. Imagine what that's done to that person. The lack of going to school was not the greatest or the best, right? Because again, if you think about school-age children, how difficult it is for us to just feel a part of, to feel accepted. If you were like me, if I may be so bold as to share some personal stuff, be mindful, I'm going to do that. And I don't mean to offend you, but I don't care what you think about me. I got enough right here, right? And where I'm going with this is simply this. Those individuals that we engage with, when we think about the environments from which they're coming from, there could have been trauma, abusive of kinds that many of us may never have experienced, only read about or heard through the news. If you think about lack of education, we need to be mindful of that. Quality education allows us to move forward in our society in a way that puts us in a position to be successful. In many cases, those that we're encountering didn't get that. As I mentioned earlier, they may have come from a single parent home. That parent may have not even graduated high school. That's not always the case, but it's certainly possible. So education may have not been something that was paramount in the home because that one parent is focused solely on what? Providing. We got to think about that. And when parents are experiencing financial instability, here's what happens. They are less focused on providing for the emotional needs of their child, right? They may not be able to model parenting style and skill sets associated, again, moving forward in life. How to navigate life circumstances. How to manage difficult conflicts, right? Because I think about in my home as a child, and again, I told you I'm going to share. See, my grandparents were born in 1918. So there was a different dynamic in terms of how parenting was modeled, but also how conflict was modeled. My grandparents didn't argue or have conflict in front of me and my brothers. They went to another room. I didn't learn how to have conflict. Right? Are you awake? Yeah. Paying attention? I don't mean you. Because I don't want to put you to sleep. I really don't. But be aware that when parents are under that kind of stress relative to providing and overcoming their income issues, that leads to anxiety, depression, and their parenting behavior is impacted. They're not focused on the child because they're solely thinking about how do I put food on the table? How do I clothe the child? How do I pay the rent, the mortgage? Those are all the things that they're concerned with because they're under financial strain. Children who grow up in financially struggling homes oftentimes deal with the same things in terms of anxiety, depression, developmental delays, and experience behavioral problems. And here's the other thing that happens. They're more susceptible to fall into substance abuse. Let's go on to individualized care. I'm sorry. So, and really to drive home what Mr. Burke was talking about is just the social determinants of health, and what that research shows and illustrates clearly. There is no debate. We understand that the systems that people are enmeshed in have you cannot express or establish how influential these systems are. And I think when we start thinking about where we are as a helping professional, we know the family is a system, we know school is a system, we know, healthcare is a system, and we as a treatment industry, behavioral health, are a system as well. And so if we can look at what happens when these other systems adversely affect individuals, I think we've got to start acknowledging that when we are not who we need to be and what we need to be, when we are not truly evolving, growing, emerging, or embracing emerging evidence and research that says, hey, there's better ways of doing things, what happens is, who bears that consequence? Very individual who's vulnerable and in need of help in the first place. So the morning presenter this morning talked about the ACEs study. We don't need to beat this, and I know at least 50% of y'all are definitely waiting on that TV and AirPod giveaway, and so we will try to go through this. If you're not familiar with the ACEs study, please get familiar with it. I remember back in 2009, I was in a counselor role, and through higher education, I was introduced to this study, and it was startling to me how little professionals were aware of ACEs study and what those implications were. I've been a CPRS trainer for the state for many, many years, no longer active in that role. However, in the CPRS trainings that we do, ACEs study is a part of that.
And you would be amazed at how many people take that class, and when we talk about ACEs, they're oblivious to that study, what the implications are, even in their own lives, Butch. And that means what? We're not where we need to be as professionals. Because if people can be 2 and 3 years clean taking a CPRS class and they're still oblivious to the prevalence of trauma and how it shows up, even in their recovery after they're done getting high, that means we're failing. And we need to be looking at what are we educating people about? Are we really addressing underlying issues that ACEs, Social Determinants of Health, establishes root causes of substance abuse? Please know, if you leave here with anything, addiction does not begin in a bottle or a bag. The conditions that create addiction begin long before that exposure and introduction ever begins. I think Dr. Murphy referenced somebody drinking and it fixing things in them they did not know were wrong, right? So with the ACE study, it's startling information. Currently, pre-COVID data shows that at least 65% of adults have experienced some type of adverse childhood experience. We know that as ACEs go up, so do health issues, so do severity and behavioral health problems, mental health issues, so on and so on. Pre-COVID data, it's estimated that nearly 60% of children have experienced adverse childhood experiences of some kind. And what we're talking about there is abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. And as great as this study was, please know it's not comprehensive. You know what the ACEs questionnaire doesn't get into? Were you bullied as a kid? Did you have inadequacies that affected you in ways that have created toxic stress? We do know that adverse experiences impact people on a neural and biological level. Rachel, how many ums am I at? I know that's very awkward for y'all. Right before we started, our chair's colleague, Rachel, said, I was talking to Mr. Burke about ums, and I said, wait a minute, I'm an guy. You mean to tell me you're going to count how many ums we say and give us a report after? And so, Rachel, please stay to the end. We've got a few more left. So the implications, our environment and lived experience, we know are directly impacting people's neurobiological development. How many of you had a choice in who your parents were, where you went to school, what your socioeconomic status was, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so in the age of information, why are we still talking about eliminating stigma when we know it ain't these people's fault, Butch? Why do we have to continue talking about stigma? We know people aren't choosing to be sick. We know people aren't choosing to be unhealthy. People aren't choosing to be addicted to drugs. Yes, that first exposure and that first decision to use may have been theirs, but I'll ask you, how much choice did you really have, oblivious to all the things that you had been through in life and how it affected you? We're dealing with ingrained personality traits, developmental issues, embedded belief systems, habitual thinking, feeling, and behavioral patterns. Neuroscience establishes that we know neural pathways are like heavily traveled paths. Mental, emotional, behavioral responses become automatic and involve little to no conscious effort, meaning that I may be working with someone who truly is trying to be better, but is struggling to actually accomplish what they want. And what do we like to do when that happens? You're not willing enough. You're not serious about recovery. Maybe you don't want what we have.
Or you take the path of some of our other programs or approaches in helping. You haven't hit bottom.
Problem is, in 2023, substance abusers no longer have the luxury of hitting bottom like some did in the past, right? Because we know now there are no safe drugs on the street. And overdose and death is staring back at us in very disturbing ways. So individualized care and unique needs. Again, this is information we know, but you heard Dr. Murphy talk about the severity index and how a high percentage of individuals struggling with substance abuse actually don't meet the criteria for a severe problem. Now, I'm going to ask you this. He had some very insightful information related to what's working and helping people move forward who have moderate alcohol and drug problems. Let me ask you this. How many treatment programs in Shelby County alone, working with the client, say, you have a moderate alcohol or drug problem? And there's some research that actually shows, given the level of your problem, you don't actually need to go to AA the rest of your life. You actually need to start exploring this information, right? Recovery capital, resilience. There's some things we know work and are associated with successful change. How many of them are actually saying, hey, let's go this way?
We can't continue to take the standardized approach, bottom line. That needs to be avoided. Know that each individual is unique. They have their own needs. We have to help them to begin to explore what their goals are. When I think about interacting with an individual, am I aware of what I'm really seeing? Am I just looking at the behavior? What's behind it? That's what I have to be thinking about. Am I involving them in setting their own goals? Establishing what they want, not what I believe they need. Do they want? Remember, they're the expert of it all. We got to think about that. It's important for us to collaborate to ensure that we're bringing them along. As you think about what Dr. Murphy talked, we're going to talk about motivational interviewing again, just to sort of reinforce that. That's about asking them, what do you need? How do we get you involved in moving forward? We need to know their background, right? We can't, their history, their narrative matters. Think about this. If I'm sitting in front of you and yes, you determine based on your assessment, but I have a need for treatment. Yet you just give me this sort of cookie cutter approach to here's how we're going to attack this. Am I involved? You're telling me what I need to do. But have you asked me any questions? Have you explored my life? Have you determined or helped me to determine whether or not I'm experiencing trauma? Have I got unresolved conflicts in my life? Maybe I have PTSD. So it's just important that we know the personal background. And when we think about an integrated practice, there are many reasons people use substances, right? And they vary from person to person. So the reason I may use may not be the same reason you use. It's important also to remember that substance use is not just a personal problem, it's a societal problem. I need that to sink in respectfully. It's a societal problem. There is no one theory or clinical approach that fully addresses every individual's needs. We need to keep that in mind when we're engaging with those we intend to help. Treatment should not only focus on helping one to stop, but it also should be focused on helping them to develop the skills needed to lead a productive life. That's imperative. And again, what that means for them, I may say you ought to go back to school, you ought to consider losing weight, on and on and on. But if that's not what they want, are they engaged? Now let's talk about, again, we're going to reinforce some things that Dr. Murphy talked about in terms of motivational interviewing. That's a person-centered, goal-oriented approach in terms of engaging with the client. It's about helping them understand what motivates them to change. And you think about the way he talked about asking certain questions in a particular way, open-ended, as opposed to a direct question. Do you think you drink too much? Well, as he said, I'm probably going to say, no, I'm fine. I don't drink too much. The other thing about motivational interviewing, practitioners use techniques, several techniques, empathy, affirming. And when I think about affirming, that's making sure that I recognize your value, that you have worth and value right here and now. When someone comes to me seeking help, I thank them, and that doesn't make me special, it's just something I do. And part of the reason I do that is because when I struggled with my own substance use issue, people made me feel bad because I had reached a point in my life And I didn't feel bad. I had no work. So when you think about ORs, and that's that approach where you're asking open-ended questions, you're affirming the individual, but you're also reflecting back to ensure that you understand what they're saying. And then you summarize to make sure that that understanding is concrete and you're connected now. I'm going to repeat this probably a couple more times, but be mindful. It takes time to build rapport. And you're not going to get that done in 1 or 2 sessions. If I'm sitting in front of you for the first time, I'm broken inside, I'm experiencing trauma. And now I've got substance use issues. I've been stigmatized, I'm self-stigmatized. And just in case you didn't know, I'm Black. So I got some other issues, and that's not to offend anybody in this room. And, you know, that could go for women, right? So I've got all this stuff that I'm dealing with. And if you're asking me to, in 1 or 2 sessions now, to just give you all of that, part of it is I've lived a life, particularly if I'm an adult, I'm hiding that. So I'm not even fully aware of it. Bring it out. You're the profession. I need you to help me. Right? It's difficult. We all know that. So I'm going to throw this one out here for free. Self-care is important for you. If you don't have a self-care regimen, I advise you now to begin one.
So, in Mr. Burke's talking about motivational interviewing, when we talk about integrated practice, obviously we're talking about taking important findings and strategies that work for multiple disciplines, perspectives, theories that are proven helpful. Now, we know CBT, for example, we know that that works for a specific population, but we also know it's established that it may not work great for some. So when we were talking about integrated practices and how do we best position ourselves to work with individuals in the most effective and meaningful way, knowing that individuals come to us with very unique needs? We thought about 3 different strategies and approaches that seem to meet the criteria of being something we can all do, regardless of who we're working with and where they are on that severity scale or their commitment to change. Motivational interviewing is certainly one of those. Another is trauma-informed care. The ACEs study, Social Determinants of Health, all the emerging research shows that we need to be creating trauma-informed care systems and professionals that understand what is going on with individuals. We've got to stop blaming people for suffering from things that they did not choose to experience. Trauma-informed care is a framework for learning to see and understand our clients and understand how their lived experiences has certainly impacted them on a biological, psychological, social level. We know that strength-based approaches are very important when working with individuals who have experienced trauma. We know that key principles of trauma-informed care, safety, trauma awareness, choice, collaboration, strength-based skill building. Trauma-informed care also use behavioral expressions like regressions and treatment episodes, slips, relapses as manifestations of triggered responses. So what we know about trauma is the impact and effect in the day-to-day existence of someone trying to overcome substance abuse is not alleviated with abstinence. You can interrupt active and illicit drug use or alcohol use, and that does not resolve the trauma. We know that this takes time. Neuroplasticity, read the research on it. It truly does take time, and we've got to be invested in giving people space to struggle as they should. It's really normal to act out in treatment. Unfortunately, what the systems have been truly guilty of is the moment that an individual starts to exhibit the very reason why they need us in the first place, what do we do, Butch? This is a little too much. You're acting out. We need you to pack your bags and go. Oh, y'all ain't seen that? Oh, y'all got quiet. I'm making sure that's just what I think. So here's something I want us to watch real quick. I don't know if I got to hit play or not. Let's see. IT, we need help. I tell you, you're letting me down. I told you we wanted to avoid this awkward experience. Okay, so now you're going to see a professional in a triggered response, anxiety, crisis, all of that is fixing to happen. I hope I'm in a safe place with supportive people who aren't going to judge. You're not going to tell me what I need to do. You're just going to sit in this space of crisis with me, Chris, right? And comfort me and let me know I'm okay, it's okay, right? And I'm not alone, right? Can we try again? Let's see. That's not going to get it.
Really, sit down. Take a time for election. I said, sit down, Lou. You know, Will was doing just fine until you showed up. But now that you're back, you have responsibilities to him. Look, we're still going to take this real. Boom. Will is not a coat that you hang in the closet and pick it up when you're ready to wear it. His life goes on. He's not supposed to be here for you. You're supposed to be here for him. You get off my back. You think I want this? Just. Now, when Will was a baby, I was scared. I don't run out on my family. I was there every day for them because that's what a man does. And Philip, you man, you man. You happy? Now you're gonna tell Will or not. I'm not gonna do you dirty. But I'll call him from the road. Yeah, why don't you do that? Yeah, I'll do it. Daddy up. What's up? Will, I'm glad you're here. Some business came up I gotta handle. So we're gonna have to put our trip on hold. You understand? Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Just for a couple of weeks. I understand. Yeah. Maybe a little longer. Yeah, whatever. Look, I'll call you next week and we'll iron out the details. Okay? Yeah. It was great seeing you, son. You too, Lou. Yeah, I'm sorry, Will. You know what? Actually, this works out better for me. You know, the slimmies of summer come to class wearing next to nothing. You know what I mean? Well, it's all right to be angry. Hey, but why should I be mad? I'm saying at least he said goodbye this time. I just wish I hadn't wasted my money buying a stupid present. I'm sorry. You know, if there was something that I... Hey, you know what? You ain't got to do nothing. I feel like, you know, ain't like I'm still 5 years old, you know? Ain't like I'm going to be sitting up every night asking my mom, when's daddy coming home, you know? Who needs him? Hey, he wasn't there to teach me how to shoot my first basket, but I learned, didn't I? Hey, I got pretty damn good at it too, didn't I? Got through my first date without him, right? I learned how to drive. I learned how to shave. I learned how to fight without him. I had 14 great birthdays without him. He never even sent me a damn card. I ain't need him then and I don't need him now. Well, now, you know what, Uncle Phil? I'm gonna get through college without him. I'm gonna get a great job without him. I'm gonna marry me a beautiful honey, and I'm having a whole bunch of kids. I'm gonna be a better father than he ever was. And I sure as hell don't need him for that, because ain't a thing he can ever teach me about how to love my kids.
Here it comes. Pay attention.
You don't want me, man.
We wanted to use this image just to demonstrate the importance of understanding there's what you see and then there's what there really is. And so we know with the iceberg concept, what you see on the surface is only about 20%, 80% is beneath the surface. And you don't really know what's going on, but it's important in trauma-informed care to realize that trauma is at play. We know the prevalence, right? You need to stop asking, has someone experienced trauma? There's big T, little t concept. The trauma that you just saw was the trauma of my life every weekend for about 6 years in my life. How do you think I showed up to treatment? Would you think I was cooperative? You think I was trusting? The anger that he had was the anger that I became froze and stuck in. It was the only way I knew to protect myself from being hurt anymore. And after experiencing that, receiving it from one of the most important people in my life for years and years and years, I swore I would never let anyone or anything hurt me like that again. And so I stopped getting high. But what were some things I had to work on if I was going to stay clean and sober? Now, so trauma-informed care is just extremely important, and we know that needs to be a foundation for how we're viewing and understanding individuals we're coming into contact with who are struggling with substance abuse. The harm reduction, and you may not be a believer in medication-assisted treatment, but I assure you harm reduction actually supports the findings that are related to trauma and trauma-informed care, because harm reduction helps us hold on to people longer, right? Trauma and harm reduction work together, in that with harm reduction, I'm no longer telling you what you have to do for me to work with you. I don't care what your goals are. As a professional helper, I'm here to help you navigate. I'm here to help you work towards whatever you think needs to be for you to be successful. Harm reduction is often thought to be syringe exchanges and condom distribution, but we actually know there's a growing consensus that it is the third wave of addiction treatment. It emphasizes safety, self-efficacy, which is another statistical finding that is extremely it's just the correlations between self-efficacy and successful change are just, it's a beautiful thing to see. And harm reduction is rooted in the idea that treatment's got to meet people where they are. Some of y'all, when you say meeting people where they are, think that means at the treatment center, right? Or at the syringe exchange in the community. That's not what meeting people where they are is really about. It's about connecting with where they are mentally, emotionally, accepting and understanding, creating space for the normalcy of acting out behaviors in the therapeutic process. Change is not a black and white process. They're going to struggle, and it is our responsibility and obligation as professionals to be knowledgeable, prepared, and skilled in working with whatever those issues are that arise in that healing that needs to occur. Some of you know this, healing ain't always pretty. Rachel, be keeping count there, I did it again. Motivational interviewing. Burke, you want to hit on this real quick? I know we're close to being out of time.
So all of you, many of you may be aware of the stages of change model. Quite frankly, no one moves through this in a linear fashion. Bottom line, in pre-contemplation, most people aren't even thinking about change. They may even recognize they have a problem. In the contemplation phase, they're really, maybe there's something there. They may be talking about having a plan. In the preparation stage, they're making plans. They may have already started making some changes and having contact with somebody who can offer support and help. In the action stage, that's where the changes may start to take place. And then they're engaged actively in terms of overcoming whatever the issues are. Remember, substance use is just a symptom, right? And we just showed you a slide. We got to get to the root causes, right? So when a person is taking action, it's one thing to have them think about and talk about abstaining, because Dr. Murphy mentioned this. Their goal may be simply to moderate. We got to remember that. Their goal, not my goal.
And how many of you as professionals are prepared to work with that and stay invested in the process?
Invested in the process, because I have to be aware of my own bias. I'm a person that believes abstinence is best, particularly if you've crossed a certain line. But again, what did I say? I believe. If that individual's goal isn't to abstain completely, I have to be willing to work with that. They may get to a point where they decide they want to abstain, but if not, I continue to work to help them to build on developing the skills needed to ensure that they don't return to active addiction that's causing the conflict that they may have brought them to us. And certainly in the maintenance stage, that's where a person is actively engaged in making the changes and have maintained some of those changes. They're continuing to build on that. They may be helping others. But again, I want to remind you that it's not a linear process. People may move up this ladder and then slide back down. That's one of the reasons we have to be mindful. Relapse is part of the continuum. We have to accept that. It's not a, oh, you messed up. It's no, let's talk about what went wrong. Where'd you go wrong in terms of the plan you set for? And how do we get you back on track?
And it's important to know about the stages of change model. Some of you are familiar with this, but this actually aligns with trauma-informed care and harm reduction, because sometimes it's the unresolved trauma that accounts for why people are moving back and forth through these stages. Sometimes it's the unmet needs, the deficits that we've yet to confront, work on, and help develop them in. And so rarely are people moving in and out of certain stages of this model willfully. And that's the thing to remember, that there's a lot going on with that individual that may not be obvious to them or you, but it's important to take time, do the work of connecting and exploring through open-ended questions, some of what we do in motivational interviewing. I don't ever have to tell someone what they need to do to ask the right questions for them to determine for themselves what they need to do, right? Questions are instruments, they're tools. You can be surgical with questions, and help people find answers that they didn't even realize they possessed.
And just be also mindful, because it was mentioned in a couple of presentations relative to what's transpired with brain function, because it's been negatively impacted by substance use. The neural pathways have been disrupted. So the brain isn't functioning properly. I simplify it for me, because I often tell people I work with, I'm not a doctor, but I played one on television. Frontal lobe goes offline the longer you use. So executive functioning is not in place. Decision making. Recognizing that if I do this, the potential for a negative consequence is this. They're operating out of the limbic system. So it's all about pressure, whatever makes me feel good. So please keep that in mind. And it's, again, it's not for any of us to become scientists. It's about understanding, recognizing that the person in front of us may not be able to make the kind of decisions that you and I are.
All right, so we know it's TV time and AirPod time. The recommendations that we see truly will help this community move forward. One is just embrace the inevitable need of evolving. There are new paradigms on the horizon. You can fight them, but it's not in your best interest as a professional if you want to do effective work. What we knew then and what we know now are two very different things. I imagine everyone in this room has done the best that you possibly could with the knowledge you possess. But please understand that, growing in our understanding and how we're approaching these issues that we're up against, it's just extremely important that as times change, so do we as professionals. Goal of substance abuse treatment should be recovery, not just abstinence. Recovery is a process that involves more than just not using. For the anti-MATers, what we do know is that through medication-assisted treatment, we know that every area of a substance user's life that we assess the severity of addiction in through medication-assisted treatment, what happens is they show not only measurable, but impressive progress in the very areas that we assess the severity of addiction. And so if you're going to tell me that's not recovery, then I don't know what recovery is. You need to empower clients to make their own decisions about their treatment. Yes, you have a head full of information, but that may not be what they're looking for. And a better approach is for you to meet them where they are, mentally, emotionally, behaviorally, empower them with trauma-informed care to make some decisions in their life. Because very often we come in imposing what needs to be happened, unintentionally triggering things in their life. They've already felt a sense a sense of having no control for quite some time. And very often that's what they experience in these treatment systems. Individualized treatment, we know doesn't work for all. And last but not least is just continuous training, education, and implementation of the latest evidence. And I know y'all know this because 50% of y'all talk to me in private about how we are failing as a system. How come we ain't talking about it out loud is the question I have. And y'all know who I'm talking to because some of y'all have been talking to me out here. We've got to start having hard conversations with ourselves. I got to be able to confront John Burke and say, John Burke, you're causing harm unintentionally, and I need you to think about it from this way, without him shutting down, without him taking it personal, without it creating conflict between me and my colleague, because I care enough about him and that client to say, hey man, I see where you're coming from, but have you thought about it from this? Because I promise you, this screen looks different from here than what it looks like from over there. And the problem is we get so locked into what we see, we're failing to think about things from other angles. Research shows success is dependent on them and who? Us. But are you pushing yourself to be at your best? Are you moving beyond what you think you know and studying areas of information that you need to learn? Or are you stuck on as is that's never really produced impressive success rates? So, one, if we pissed you off today, we've done our job. Two, John Burke's made a few good jokes, and the awkward thing with IT, that was great. Three, we'll make sure Rachel emails all of the counts so everybody can have it, and moving forward, you can bring it up to us. And thank you for your time. We have everyone.
Stay with me.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, thanks so much for hanging in there. Butch, how many registrations we have today?